Again, good morning. Last weekend at our graduation, the speaker was a woman who had been in ministry for 30-some years. She had actually started at age 50, and when she spoke to us at the graduation, she was 82. And she told this story of her granddaughter, who one day, much to the embarrassment of the girl's mother, said, "Grandma, what does it feel like to have more years behind you than are ahead of you?" And I think that comment is appropriate for my comments today. When I was in my law practice for a number of years, we had a younger partner who would often, when we go to lunch, order her dessert. Now, she was one of these disgusting people that can eat dessert first, eat lots of dessert, and none of it shows. This is not, as you know, an affliction that I suffer from. Now, I don't know who first came up with the quip. It might have been me. Somebody would inevitably say, "Life is uncertain. Eat dessert first." In reminiscent of another saying that has been attributed variously to Congressman Claude Pepper from Florida and the Puerto Rican golfer Chichi Rodriguez, at my age, I don't buy green bananas anymore. Now, while these comments were meant to be humorous, obviously, I got the laugh for that, one of the characteristics of being human is that we are conscious that we will die. Now, while death is the fate of all living things, only humans and maybe some other mammals, we're not sure, are aware of the fact that they will die at some point. And while most of us cannot know with any degree of certainty when this is going to take place, the fact of death is a certainty. Over the millennia, one of the purposes of religion has been to address the question of what happens after we die, and whether there is an afterlife, a topic that's been discussed in the past. Now, for many conventional Christians, this life is merely a prelude, a preview of coming attractions for the real movie or game, which is eternity in heaven. What we do in the here and now is only meaningful only insofar as it prepares us for the life to come. While this could be an attractive notion, for many of us it is unsatisfactory. While an afterlife might be desirable, depending of course on who is there, many of us, I'm sure, suspect that this one wild and precious life, to quote the poet Mary Oliver, is all that is, and it's our responsibility to make the most of it. So today I wanted to address the question, knowing we are mortal, how then shall we live? The first reading this morning from Ecclesiastes suggests one point of view. Koheleth, the teacher, laments, "A generation goes and a generation comes, but the earth remains forever. What has been is what it will be, and what has been done is what will be done, and there is nothing new under the sun." To the author of Ecclesiastes, life is all vanity, which might be translated as meaningless or absurd. In light of this, the teacher counsels, "So I commend the enjoyment of life, because nothing is better for a man or woman under the sun than to eat, drink, and be glad. Then joy will accompany them in their work all the days of the life God has given them under the sun." This verse has sometimes also been rendered, "Eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow you may die." In this view of life, given that it will not last, our goal should be enjoyment and pleasure. Now, Koheleth does not say this is a bad thing, or a good thing for that matter. It is simply, in his view, that's the way things are, and we should make do. Buddhist sage and teacher Thich Nhat Hanh suggests a different view. In the heart of the Buddha's teachings, Thich Nhat Hanh identified three Dharma seals of the Buddha. Among them, anitya translated as impermanence. In Buddhist teaching, everything is impermanence. However, the fact that everything is impermanent does not make it meaningless or vanity, as Koheleth would have us believe. Take the flower, for example. Thich Nhat Hanh writes, the flowers decompose. But knowing this does not prevent us from loving flowers. In fact, we're able to love them more because we know how to treasure them while they're still alive. If we learn to look at a flower in the way that impermanence is revealed to us, when it dies, we will not suffer. Impermanence is more than an idea. It is a practice to help us touch reality. Impermanence is essential to change, and change is essential to growth. If everything were permanent and could not change, then we couldn't grow or improve. Impermanence is what makes the transformation possible. We should learn to say, long live impermanence. Thanks to impermanence, we can change suffering into joy. Now, while impermanence means that we will die, it also means that there will be room for growth and a next generation. Without death, there's no room for new life. In one of Isaac Asimov's books, I don't remember which one, there's a race of beings that lives forever. Now, while this may seem like a desirable goal, Asimov pictures them as living lives which are physically and emotionally isolated from one another as they age. They live on a planet where there are no children and no real hope of a future. Thus, death, far from being a punishment as pictured in Genesis, is in reality a means for promoting growth and hope for the future. As you know, I've got 5 grandchildren. While I understand that it's quite possible, in fact probable, that I will not be alive when their children have children, I have hope that if we don't destroy our planet through our greed and failure to think ahead, that these great-great-grandchildren of mine may see a world that I can only imagine today. My impermanence sets the stage for their future. If I and my generation were to live forever, there would be no room for our descendants to live and to thrive. So long live impermanence. So all of this being said then, what do we do with this one wild and precious life? I've spent quite a bit of time in the last few years reflecting on that question in my own life. Seminary and clinical pastoral education tend to do that to you. On May 18th, I graduated from seminary. That was not only my graduation day, but my 66th birthday. This marked another milestone in a journey that began when I was in high school, that picked up speed and direction when I took my first class in seminary in 2005 and 2006, that presented me with challenges when I began clinical pastoral education in 2007, and that will be finally completed, hopefully, in the fall of 2015, when I should complete the ministerial credentialing process. This journey gives salience to the question Parker Palmer asked in the dust jacket of his book, Let Your Life Speak. Palmer says, is the life I am living the same as the life that wants to live in me? Before you tell your life what you intend to do with it, listen to what it intends to do with you. Before you tell your life what truths and values you've decided to live up to, let your life tell you what truths you embody, what values you represent. My dad worked in the post office for about 25 years before retiring in the early 1970s. He'd been trained as a teacher and in fact taught for a few years before and after his service in the Army during World War II in Korea. From later discussions with him, I had the sense that his time as a teacher and a coach was a very happy time in his life. We never talked about, and I never really found out, why he made this vocational shift from teaching to becoming a postal worker. Certainly, over the years, teaching, while it was not his job or formal vocation, was an avocation and was part of who he was at his core. Of that I am convinced. While he never directly talked to me about becoming a teacher or about an interest in teaching, the way he lived his life spoke to me of that love, which rubbed off on me. Similarly, his dedicated work with the church and his and my mother's caring for others certainly had an impact on my vocational decisions. The way his life spoke to me had an impact on what I decided to do with my life. My own vocational history was also a matter of trying to listen to what life intended to do with me. As I've said before, I went to law school because I decided I didn't want to be a Lutheran minister. At the time, I looked on the law degree as a credential with a variety of options. I really never intended to actually practice law, especially in a private practice environment. However, I began to learn that you don't necessarily have control over your vocational choices. Job markets, family needs, and other issues often control our vocational decisions as much as what we want or plan. Through a variety of actions, inactions, and happenstance, I ended up as an attorney in a mid-sized law firm doing business, tax, estate planning, real estate, and litigation law. I was a generalist. This was certainly not what I had in mind when I decided to go to law school. I was going to be Clarence Darrow. But that didn't quite work out either. Now, for the most part, I did not dislike my practice. I generally enjoyed the lawyers I worked with and had good relationships with my clients. The work was intellectually stimulating and, to be sure, remunerative. But deep down, my life was telling me that my work was not embodying my own truth or values. Much, though not all, of what I was doing was solely about getting or keeping money for my clients, and often did not seem to have a larger purpose. I sought this larger purpose outside of my work, in activities involving my children and my church, but over time I found that, in Parker Palmer's words, I was not living the same kind of life that wanted to live in me. In 1990, I finally got the nerve to make a change, to leave the financial security of the larger firm for the greater uncertainties but greater freedoms of a smaller, at that time, 3-attorney firm. While this was scary, it was also what I knew I needed to do. As it happened, and I really didn't plan it this way, this was also a significant change in the nature of my practice, though this took a few years to engineer. I happened upon the newly emerging field of elder law, a practice that, as I have said on prior occasions, allowed me to bring my head and my heart into alignment. This was a field that was at once intellectually stimulating and personally rewarding, and I could make a living at it. And it was a field of law in its infancy, both in Wisconsin as well as in the wider nation. A few other fortuitous circumstances, like losing a bar association election, and my practice took off, and our firm became one of the go-to firms in elder law in the southern part of the state. And this worked for me for about 16 years. But restless soul that I am, I couldn't leave quite well enough alone. Ever since joining the First Unitarian Society in 1988, thoughts of ministry had kept creeping into my consciousness. The questions returned as to whether I was living the life that really wanted to live in me. And I was able to keep these thoughts at bay for about 16 years until the General Assembly in Long Beach in 2004. Without telling anybody, in particular my family, I quietly, I thought, attended a workshop put on by Meadville Lombard and Starr King, the two UU seminaries. This was a seminar called "So You Think You Want to Be a UU Minister." Well, I tried to tell myself that this was the beginning of a discernment process. In reality, when I crossed through the door into that seminar room, the decision had already been made. I just was pretending that it hadn't. And in a sense, this was when the question of impermanence and my mortality came to the fore. First time I really began to think about it. When I entered that room, I'd recently turned 56 years old. Because of some business issues related to the law firm, I wasn't going to be able to retire for another 8 years. At that time, I'd be 64 years old, not elderly by any means, but certainly not young. This was something I believed I really wanted and perhaps needed to do. I realized, however, that I could no longer defer my decision. Given my age and the time it would take me to achieve my goal, in a sense for me it was a now or never moment. Now to be sure, I could have passed on the opportunity. I could have continued my practice for a few more years, continued my work as a layperson in the congregation, and found other things to do upon retirement. But I had this sense that there were a number of things my father might have wanted to do in his life, including going back into teaching or perhaps even becoming a minister, which he did not do. I decided that I did not wish to live the rest of my life without having at least tried to attain my dream. Now perhaps I'm being a bit dramatic here, but this is a real feeling for me, and I believe I made the right decision for myself. Vocational decisions are not the only issues that arise as we live out our lives. Even as we move into our retirement years and work life recedes into the background, at least it has for some people, we still have the task of determining what makes the remainder of our life meaningful. And as we embark on that task, we again face the dichotomy offered by the Buddha and Koheleth. Koheleth, by the way, is the preacher in Ecclesiastes. Is our finitude a source of hope and comfort, as the Buddha suggests? Or does it render our continued striving to be purposeless, in the outlook of Koheleth? A few years ago, my dessert first friend gave me a book entitled How Then Shall We Live? By Wayne Muller. He's a speaker, an author, an activist, a graduate of the Harvard Divinity School. This book found its way onto my bookshelf, and then to a place where all books go when you really need them, like when you're writing a sermon. That great void where unmarked socks, ball markers for golf, and such other lost essential items disappear. Fortunately, though, given the magic of the internet and Kindle, I was able to easily secure an electronic copy of the book and read it in preparation for this sermon. Long live the internet. In his book, Muller explores 4 simple questions that reveal the beauty and meaning of our lives. I found that this book was helpful to me in trying to make some additional sense of life in an impermanent world. In a way, he offers another way of looking at the questions raised by Parker Palmer. So I want to touch briefly on each of these 4. The first question that Muller asks is, who am I? Who am I? As Palmer points out, and as each of our lives demonstrates, one of our biggest challenges really is to figure out who we are. What is our essence? What inside us gives us our strength? Muller observes that if we can take nourishment from this inner strength and wisdom, we will find great peace and courage. My experience over the past 10 years or so of ministerial formation have taught me that this is work that we can do at any time during our lives. In many ways, the biggest challenge of my ministerial education was clinical pastoral education. It was the intentional part and process of taking my life to date apart, examining it, and then trying to put it back together. As we age, we get set in our ways. Yet the very essence of clinical pastoral education, or CPE as we call it, is to challenge those old ways and see if there are better ways of living. For me, the biggest challenges were overcoming my essential shyness. I tend to be very introverted. And even more difficult, opening myself up to my own emotions and making me more sensitive to the emotions of others. I came into the process with an approach to the world that was linear, left-brained, rational. Emotions, who needs them? CPE, especially the one-year residency in La Crosse, helped me move in a direction of increased emotional openness. Is that work done? No. But at least now I have the basis for the additional emotional wholeness that was acting. Muller's second question is, what do I love? By what star do we navigate our journey on earth? What passion stirs us? What gives us sustenance? This very well may not be our chosen vocation. It could be an avocation, something that we do not to increase our material wealth, but rather to increase the wealth of our soul. For my father, I believe that star was teaching, no matter whether it was coaching grade school basketball, leading Bible studies at his church, or mentoring the employees that worked for him as a supervisor at the post office. Part of our goal in life, even in later life, is to identify that star. And then the question that I asked at the beginning, how shall I live knowing that I will die? Muller frames it in this way: if we are aware of our mortality, we can live less by accident and live instead with clarity and purpose. In the book, Muller tells a number of stories of persons living with life-limiting or terminal conditions. In my view, though, there's a broader question, especially as we age. While I think that I am in relatively good health, at least my doctor tells me that, I know that I'm closer to the end of my life than the beginning. However many years I have left have become precious to me. I want to make sure that I don't fritter them away. I want to make sure that I will make a difference. While to me this is an important way to live life, as the end comes nearer, this becomes more urgent. And the final question is, what is my gift to the family of the earth? Muller says that each of us has a gift to bring to the table, and the family of the earth yearns to receive it. And so he suggests that one of our goals is to uncover our true gift. And one of the benefits of aging is that we have time to reflect who we are and what we can offer to the world. Contrary to Koheleth's lament, life does not have to be vanity or meaningless striving for personal pleasure. We each have gifts, big or small, that we can give. This past year, I volunteered about an hour a week in my granddaughter's kindergarten classroom. That's where I got the cold, I think. My primary task was to listen to children who would read to me from books in their book box. Each kid had a book box with different books set at kind of their level. And so my gift to them was to have some time when an adult would spend with them one-on-one listening to them read. And many of these kids, reading was really a challenge. That was one of the reasons they were assigned to me. My gift to them is some time when they had an adult spend one-on-one time with them and help them share my lifelong love of reading. It's a simple gift. I'll probably not change the educational system in Madison or the United States, but for those students, I hope it will be a precious time for them as they look back on their lives. Some of those kids, when I see them out on the playground, say, "Hey, Mr. Jim, how you doing?" And that feels pretty good. So how shall we live? How will our lives speak to us? What shall we do with this one wild and precious life? As he so often does, the Dalai Lama sums it up quite nicely. We are visitors on this planet. We are here for 90, 100 years at the very most. During that time, we must try to do something good, something useful with our lives. Try to be at peace with yourself and help others share that peace. If you contribute to other people's happiness, you will find the true goal and the true meaning of life. May it be so. So, let's sit down. Let's have a little talk here.
Let's see. We just take this off the
The handheld's on the.
handheld.
Yeah, there's a...
Yes, I think, did I see a hand up?
I do this too often, and most of you have heard it, but one time driving to school with my son, when he was about 10, I just said, "Well, have you ever thought about like why we're here, or what you're supposed to do here or why you're on this planet? And he's looking at me like, oh my God, this is going to be a lecture. And then I didn't say anything, and after a couple minutes, he got this impish look on his face, and he said, have fun. At the time, I didn't say anything, but I thought maybe that was a childish response. And then I realized that